So how is Christianity different than all other religion? Well, that is the question that we hopefully will get the answer to, because that's the title of this video. This is by What Do You Meme, and without further ado, let's watch.
He met the standards that we couldn't, and then he offered his life to us as a free gift, so that way God...
So he offered his life as a free gift, right? I'm very interested to see any verse in the Bible where Jesus speak of that. I'm here because I'm offering my life for free for you to, pay for your sin.
I wasn't always a Christian, so I can too easily relate to how weird Christians might seem to the non-Christian world. I get it. If you're not a Christian, you might think that all religions are basically the same with some small little nuances.
Not really. I think there's a lot of differences between some major religion, right? Although there are similarities, a lot of them within the three major religion, but if you compare to other religion, I think there's a lot of differences. That's my opinion as well.
And I get that perspective as well. If that's you, then I hope that this video at least gives you some insights as to why Christianity differs in drastic ways from every other religion, and why I believe that Christianity is right for you no matter who you are or what you've been through. And if you are a Christian, I'm going to give you 3 things that every single Christian absolutely should know, but unfortunately, most don't. And that's why the rest of the world is under the assumption that Christianity is really just like every other religion out there, which is why they don't see much of a need for Jesus in the first place. Now, all 3 of the reasons that I'm going to give are critical, so make sure you stick around to the end. And if this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that sub button and meme team. You guys ready? Then let's go! Now, if you were to ask most Christians why they know that Christianity is...
Was that pause for us to actually say, yes, we are ready, or something like Dora the Explorer or something, right? When she asks question and then there's a pause for the kids to answer, right? Is that because I just wondering, just watching that, because there's a pause there and I do not know what to do. Should I like, yes, we are ready?
True. You're probably going to be getting a lot of the same things that you've heard from people in every other religion. And this is where my story kicks in. Prior to me being convinced that Christianity was true, I went to every single kind of church that I could find, ranging from every kind of Christian church to non-Christian churches, even to the Church of Scientology. And the main question I asked everyone was why their religion was true as opposed to other religions that contradict their religion's teachings.
So when he said all the churches, I'm assuming it is the different type of religion that exist in the US, I'm assuming. Because I think most of them will have churches, right? But if you go to the Eastern religion, I don't think it is called churches, right? So I think what he is exposed to when he say he go to all the religion, that all is within the scope of what is available within the region. That's my assumption based on the story so far.
When I asked this, I got the same sorts of responses over and over again. I would have people tell me some sort of personal story about how something happened that they consider to be miraculous, and how they used to be a bad person, but now they're a lot better, and a bunch of other things along those lines. During this time, I was going to a different church every week, and I was hoping to hear something that stood out from all of the other reasons, but all I got was really the exact same reasoning from the church that I was at the week prior. Now, this actually kind of bugged me because at that point, I was convinced that God existed, but I wasn't really too convinced if he was revealed in any of the major religions today. So now, standing from where I'm at today,
all the major religion, but because major religion should include, I think, Islam, Jewish or Judaism, perhaps. Judaism, is it part of the major? But normally it's among those, right? Or if you want to see globally, then I do not know. Hinduism have a lot of followers. Buddhism, perhaps. I'm not sure whether he explored those.
When I look back at those times, I realize why people think that Christianity is the same as every other religion. People think that there isn't any evidence for any of them, and it all comes down to people's own subjective and personal or private experiences. Now, of course, I'm not saying that it's wrong for you to talk about your experiences or what God has done in your life. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that later, I came to realize that there was at least one thing that Christians can say when asked the question of why their view is true as opposed to others, and it was something that other religions can't also claim. That thing is clear objective evidence. Let me explain. When it comes to whether or not Christianity...
Okay, before the explanation, as the core point there, Islam claimed to be the same, right? In the sense that it have a clear objective evidence.
is true. That's entirely based on the claim that Jesus rose from the dead. As Paul the Apostle even says in the Bible, if Jesus had not been raised from the dead, then our faith is worthless and we should be pitied more than anyone else. The truth of Christianity literally stands or falls on whether or not Christ really did raise from the dead, because Christianity teaches that those who trust in Christ will raise from death to life, just as Christ raised from death to life. So if Jesus didn't really raise from the dead, then neither will we. Christianity is ultimately about God's plan to save us from death and enter into a relationship with Him, so the truth of Christianity really does depend on that single event. So, the question now is, do we have any reason to think that the resurrection actually happened? To cut the suspense, the answer is yes. We actually do have really good evidence in support of the resurrection of Jesus that's supported by historical facts that virtually all historians are in unanimous agreement about. I won't argue for the facts here, but I went ahead and linked a couple of videos down below that are great in explaining the basic overview of some of the facts if you're interested in learning more. But the important takeaway here is to realize that when it comes to the facts and evidence in support of a religion or a worldview, no other religion is even in the same ballpark as Christianity. Now, I know that
Interesting claim there. I'm assuming when he say clear evidence historical, it is not based on the Bible. I'm assuming, because if it's primarily the proof are in the Bible, then the valid, meaning the, how to say, no, is it the validity, meaning that the Bible is in entire as a whole should stand the test as well, right? Otherwise, then whatever is being mentioned falls apart. But I assuming he's because there's a link or something, I haven't checked it out yet, but I'm assuming when he says clear historical evidence, it's not based on the Bible. I'm assuming, because otherwise then it's, I'm not sure whether it's a clear argument or not, but it's a problematic argument.
That sounds like a bold claim, but the fact is that the evidence surrounding the facts of other religions are usually non-existent, or at best, any of the facts or evidence given for the core truth of their religion doesn't even come close in terms of quality or veracity compared to the core truth of Christianity. The second...
So I'm assuming because the early part he compared to Scientology or whatever type of churches available there. If that is the case within that, I think, yeah, because all of those are clearly made quite recent also, but so they do not really have substantial evidence, if you want, for evidence, right? Interesting. But the thing about that is that it is true to say in the line of, if you cannot prove that Jesus actually rose from the dead, then all falls apart. But if there's a count that says that, because my question about whether it's from the Bible or not, because even about that in the Bible there's contradiction in terms of the accounts, right? So if there's independent account not within the Bible, then maybe we can discuss further. But if even people see something happen that can be interpreted as Jesus rose back from the dead, does that legitimately prove as an evidence that the Christianity as it is now is the truth? It's a lengthy discussion, but just
reason for why Christianity is different is because according to Christianity, good people aren't saved. Now, I know that that's immediately offensive, but just hear me out.
Problem isn't that good people can't be saved, but it's that whatever we mean by good, that standard alone is enough to show you that you aren't one of those good people that you describe. Now, I know that you don't believe me. I wouldn't believe me either. So try and think of it this way. Imagine you die today and you find yourself in front of God. Now, this is the time where you await judgment to know if you'll make it into heaven or not. Of course, you go into panic mode and you start to try to remember the 10 Commandments just so that way you can kind of get a heads up to how good you did. And you only remember 4, but you know that you probably broke at least 2 of those. Once you start to realize that you might be in trouble, you start to think how it isn't fair that God would judge you by some commandments that you didn't even believe in while you were on earth. While you were on earth, you thought that you were a good person and you assumed that even if God did exist, surely he would know that you're a good person and let you into heaven. So God being omniscient, he already knows what you're thinking. And he says, I understand that you didn't accept the Bible while you were on earth, so I won't judge you by the commandments given in the Bible. And at this point, you let out a big sigh of relief because a big weight has just been lifted from your shoulders. All along, you knew that you were a good person. But then he says, instead, I'll judge you by your own standards. And he pulls out a video recorder. And on that video recorder, you find that there's a recording of every single time that you told someone that they shouldn't do something that you considered to be immoral. It captured every single moment that you got morally outraged or complained about something that someone else did. Now, with the recorder in his hand, God tells you that he's going to be fair and he's only going to judge you by your own moral standards. You know, the moral standards that you consider to be fair. And he says that if he's going to condemn you, he's only going to condemn you according to the standards that you believed in and the standards that you condemned other people by. That's fair. And then he presses play. And you both sit there watching recordings of every single time that you made a moral claim, and he starts writing them all down on a list, and you know that you're going to be held accountable to the moral principle of the claims that you made. So maybe in different ways you said things like, you shouldn't tell others how to live their lives, or you shouldn't be selfish, or you shouldn't hurt other people's feelings, or anything like that. Right after the first one, you're hoping that it's done, but what you realize is that the list keeps getting longer and longer. When the footage finally stops, God hands you the list, and then he asks, how do you think you did? What do you think your answer would be? If you're anything like me, you probably didn't do too well. You might even feel blindsided about how bad you did, but the reality is, we all think we're far better than we actually are, even according to our own standards. And the same principle applies to religious people who do believe in God. We see this same principle being applied to the religious people at the time of Jesus. They thought that they were in a better position with God than the sinners because they kept the law. But then Jesus came along to show that they weren't any better off. Remember what Jesus said to him? He's like, oh, so you think you're good because you haven't committed murder and adultery? Well, I've got some bad news for you. If you've even looked at your brother with hate, you've committed murder in your heart, and if you've even looked at a woman with lust, then you've committed adultery in your heart. So, you've broken the same laws that the sinners have. Oh, and by the way, don't just ignore your enemies and not retaliate with harm when they've done you wrong, but instead, you have to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And we wonder why they wanted Jesus killed. In Christianity, the law wasn't made to show you how good you are, but instead it was made to show you how good that you aren't, because then and only then will you realize your need for a savior.
So while in every other religion, your faithfulness or your morality or your hard work determines if you get into heaven or not, Christianity actually has it the other way around. In Christianity, you don't get into heaven by trying harder or being more moral than others, because the fact is, you can't be perfect and you can't even live up to your own standards.
Is that a dichotomy though? Is that something that mutually exclusive? That we imperfect, that we cannot become perfect, we still have weakness, etc., etc., etc. And the other statement of trying our hardest to be the best that we can be. Is that mutually exclusive? Just because we cannot be perfect, we aren't perfect, then that negates that trying our best to be the best at avoiding temptation, etc., is totally worthless, etc. Is it mutually exclusive? Or accepting that we are weak, we are having weakness, we are not perfect, but at the same time we're trying, we are not claiming that we can be perfect, etc., but trying our best to live up to a certain standard while accepting that, you know, we have weaknesses, etc. Why can't that be a thing? That is one of the interesting thing that this is not the first time where I hear a Christian says as if those two cannot mutually exist. Just because obviously we have to accept that none of us are perfect, right? We are creation. We have weaknesses. We you know, we fall and have to come back up, etc. But that fact, because just is as if I'm trying my best to be the best that I can, if I'm trying to do that, the accusation on me is that, so you think you can be perfect? No. This trying, this effort does not mean that I assume or I think I can be Perfect, right? So that's the thing that I'm wondering, whether all Christian think like that or how.
In fact, it doesn't even depend on your hard work or your moral performance at all. Instead, it depends on what Christ did on the cross in your place and the moral life that he lived that allows those of us who believe in him to enter into heaven. He met the standards that we couldn't, and then he offered his life to us as a free gift so that way God can see his life in our place instead of our own. And this leads to the last point.
So what he mentioned there is quite interesting. I'm not sure whether it is substantiated by any evidence, be it in the Bible or not, that Jesus offered his life. Let us hear back.
He met the standards that we couldn't, and then he offered his life to us as a free gift so that way God...
So he offered his life as a free gift, right? I'm very interested to see any verse in the Bible where Jesus speak of that. I'm here because I'm offering my life for free for you to, pay for your sin. Is there any verse like that? Because I haven't heard any Christian point out that kind of verse. Or is it someone speak of Jesus as if that is the case when Jesus never see that? Out of curiosity, please, this is of course for my Christian friends. Fill me up, I like to learn.
God can see his life in our place instead of our own. And this leads to the last point. In Christianity, we aren't pointing to a prophet, but we're pointing to God.
That is interesting if you ask opinion of Muslim, right? Because when you point to Jesus, you are pointing to prophet. When Muslim never do that, in the sense of we always pray and submit and worship God alone. We never make any prophet a God, unlike Christian, from the Muslim perspective, of course. So when he says, as if this is a differentiation, it is interesting to see what he says next.
Religions are fundamentally based on a prophet or a guru telling you how you can find God. They claim to be a messenger sent by God to tell you how you have to do some sort of hard work into building your way up to God in order to reach heaven. Christianity is the only religion in the world that teaches the opposite. Instead of you working your way up to God, God puts on human flesh and enters into our world in order to suffer and die in our place so that way we could have an eternal relationship with him. So to put it simply, every other religion shows you the hard work that you can do in order to find and reach God. But in Christianity, God is the one who does the hard work and comes down from heaven to earth in order to find and reach you. In other words, they're kind of telling you how to build a ladder from here to heaven in hopes that you can get the ladder built before you die, and then you can finally reach God. So
this point is not about prophet then. It is more about, compared to other belief, Christianity is the only religion that believe that God will come into our world, die here for our retribution, right? Did I catch it correctly?
God is the one who did the hard work of building the ladder from heaven down to us instead of the other way around. So while every other religion says, I'm a prophet, come to help you find God,
okay,
Christianity says, I'm God, come to find you.
So when he says, prophet says, God says, etc., any claim as such have to be scrutinized first, right? Because if you want to differentiate based on claim, that's one thing, but to say actually God do that, God actually did that, is another thing, right? Because it only comes after you, unless we are talking about conceptually. Conceptually, Christianity says like that, right? And other religions says like that.
While they say obey and you might be accepted, only in Christianity does God say you're accepted, now you get to obey out of love rather than fear. Now there's another side to the claim that Christianity is just like every other religion, kind of like the claim that Katy Perry made in her recent interview with Apple Music where she talks about it. Go ahead and click here to see what I mean.
Is this the end?
But the next time that you hear people claiming that Christianity is just like every other religion, what are you going to say?
So that's the end. I'm not really entirely sure what that third point, because if you are talking about the fact that God, the belief that God did that, isn't that already covered in the previous point? Except if we want to point out that other religion, there's a prophet, or if you say guru, etc., we know those kind of, it is obviously not even claimed to be from the divine, right? It's come from their thinking or meditation or whatever. But for like Islam or perhaps Judaism, right, when we talk about prophet come, it's not prophets come on their own, right? They are messengers sent by God, and of course they have to prove that, etc. So that's the next level. But there's no difference between, you know, any claim of God sending down messengers, and then we have to evaluate whether this is true prophet or messenger and what is the proof for that, right? But yeah, so I'm trying to understand the third point. But anyway, yeah, going back to the title, of course Christianity is very different in the sense that the core belief that God do the hard work, as he point out, right? So God is the one that do the hard work for us. I think that is very tempting, especially if you have a certain, you know, outlook or background or whatever, that is very tempting to accept, because not to accuse everyone that become Christianity choose the easier choice. I'm not accusing that, but just from a, you know, objective perspective, you can see that, you know, how it is different compared to you have to try your best, you know, to become the best person that you could possibly have. You are not perfect, obviously, but, you know, trying your best, compared to no need, you are not perfect from the beginning, right? So if that, because that is implied, right? Anyway, would appreciate any additional point or any different point of view from my Christian friends, because I'm not sure what his, you know, because in my comment section, when I interact with Christians, there are those who are from, for example, the Catholic that says this is the true Christianity, the other are not really, they are deviant. But when I thought the Protestant, etc., they said the other way around. So as an outsider, I still see it, you know, I would not say which one represent the true Christianity or whatever. I'm not well versed enough to comment on that. Obviously, from a Muslim perspective, we do believe that we are the one that follow truly what Jesus is all about, right? The true message. Of course, with that said, thank you for watching. See you next time.